Hello anybody, and thanks for tuning into Monday Morning Handicapping. This is a Pedigree playlist where I'm going to be taking a look at a former racehorse that has now found a new career in the breeding shed. The purpose of this playlist is to give me a sense of where these horses' offspring are thriving on the track, what sort of conditions, what surfaces, what distances. And this horse that I'm covering today is a horse named Volatile. It's one of the newer stallions in the breeding shed, so little is known about how his offspring is going to run on the track. So not only do I want to provide myself with some information, I just thought I would share what I found with everybody else, a little food for thought. So let's get started. First, some agenda and caveats. I'm currently selecting top freshman sires of 2024. This is for the sake of recency, and less is known so far about the offspring of some of these runners. So I sort of want to get a jump on what information will be useful when seeing horses sired by some of these horses that I have been covering. So in this video, I'm going to review Volatile's racing career, check out some of the distances he's run and won at, some of the surfaces he won on, and also some of his major wins throughout his career. We'll review my Google Sheets documenting the top 50 earners by Volatile, and this file will be included in the description below the video. And I'm looking at the top 50 earners of these runners, since these runners showcase what Volatile's offspring's peak potential might look like. If I looked at just a random assortment, we might not see what the best that Volatiles can offer, and so I thought by looking at the top 50 earners, the horses that are running the best, what can you expect from some of Volatile's top runners, the ones that might win most often, and where are they thriving? Of course, some lesser Volatile type horses could win at lower level tracks against softer company, but I thought that this would just give me a better gauge of when they're right, when they're really good, when they're competent on the racetrack, where they're going to be doing their best running. We'll also review Volatile's stud career, their first win, the age they won at, the distance they won at, the surface they won on, and progressions as they keep racing throughout their career. I also think this is relevant because these metrics are used by owners before spending thousands and sometimes millions of dollars before buying a horse to race and or eventually breed. And my aim for this playlist is to provide some useful information when handicapping races for 2-year-olds that have few, if any, races in their career. When this is the case, individual proclivities on the racetrack can be partially determined by pedigree. So a lot of times in 2-year-old races, they've raced 0 times, maybe once, twice, 3 times, and it's hard to gauge where these horses are going to run well. So if a horse is starting in short races and now is stretching out to a longer race, by knowing the pedigree, who the mother and father of the horse is, that can give you a sense of whether or not the horse may or may not run as well or appreciate the change in circumstances of the given race. So I hope some of this information just helps myself along with anyone watching this when it comes to those races. So Volatile's racing career, first of all, his sire or father was a racehorse named Violence. His dam or mother was a racehorse named Melody Lady. And the dam-sire, so the father of his mother, was a horse named Unbridled Song. Volatile was born in 2016 and raced from 2019 through 2020. He was purchased at auction in 2017 for $850,000. Volatile had 6 races in his career, 5 wins and a second place finish, and earned $340,000 in his career, including a grade 1 win. Won his debut, so first ever race, first ever time hitting the racetrack. He won that race going 6 furlongs or 6/8 of a mile or 3/4 of a mile on the dirt surface at Ellis Park. All of his races were run at 6 furlongs, so that 3/4 of a mile distance race around 1 turn. Volatile's sire, again that's Violence, was a grade 1 and grade 2 winner routing, so going a mile or greater. His dam or mother was an ungraded stakes winner sprinting, so a little bit of mix of distances in the family line. His dam-sire was a 2-time grade 1 winner and a grade 2 winner routing, so going a mile or greater. Volatile's stud career, so out in the breeding shed, he commands a $12,500 stud fee. He's currently standing at 3 Chimneys Farm in Kentucky. He had the second most wins by progeny from the freshman sires of 2024. In his first crop, horses of his sold for up to $1.15 million, and his second crop of runners, they sold for up to $450,000. So far in 2025, they've sold for up to $350,000. So it is going down in number a little bit, so just something to keep in mind. He also produced the 6th most amount of runners from the class of 2024, so a relatively sought after sire. And now I want to show everyone my Google Sheets document where I'm basing all my information for this video off of. And again, this file will be provided in the description below the video. So here's a look at the chart that I made. On the left-hand column, you have the horse's name in order of by earnings that are sired by Volatile. So the top earning horse out of Volatile is a horse named Speed King. If we go over here, we can see his individual record. He's had 6 career starts. In parentheses is the total number of career starts, 2 wins, a second, and no thirds. If we look at this entire box or column over here, we have first career win. So for Speed King, his first career win was in start number 1. He won his debut race. He was the age of 2 in the 11th month, so in November, going a distance of 6 furlongs on the dirt at Churchill Downs Racetrack. He's got 2 wins, but we go over to the most recent win. So no matter if they have 2 wins or 4 wins or 5 wins, this is just the most recent win so that we can get a sense of where these horses are being aimed towards, so that we can get a sense of their progression and where Volatile sired horses overall are likely to go as they progress and advance in their racing career. So Speed King's most recent win at the age of 3 in the first month, so in January, going a distance of 8.5 furlongs, so a mile and a 16th, quite a bit further than his debut race where he won on the dirt once again at Oaklawn Park. Over here we have the dam-sire, so the father of the mother of Speed King was a horse named Corinthian, and this will come in handy especially when handicapping, but also when you see horses go from a sprint to a route or on the dirt to turf. The dam-sire could have a bit of influence on where these horses end up going, so it's important to keep these names just in the back of your mind and remember sort of what these horses like to do, where they're being geared towards, because they can be the dam-sire of many horses. And I've done that for his top 50 earners with their careers, their start when they got their first win. If it's blank, that means the horse has yet to have a win. If it's blank on the right column, they have yet to have a most recent or a second win of any kind. And I do that for his top 50 earners with some averages down at the bottom if you care to look. Also, if you notice at the bottom of the tab, I've done Vekoma already. I've done McKinsey. We're on to Volatile now. And the sum column is where I compare the notes of each of the horses I've covered so far. And you can take a look at that for yourself, but let's continue on with the video. Also, I want to mention that if you're not sure where to find the sire in the racing form, you can look right here in this highlighted section. You see sire, and this horse is sired by Volatile. And the dam, or the mother of this horse, is a horse named Duplicate. And in parentheses over here is the dam-sire, so the father of the mother. The father of the mother of this horse was American Pharoah, a Triple Crown winner, sired by Volatile. 15-1 on the morning line, so that one just interests me, but I just wanted to use this as an example of where you can find this information in your racing form. Also, I do have a playlist, How to Read a Racing Form, and in one of the videos in that playlist, I go over this entire section right here and break down what it all means. So if you're interested in learning more about how to read the racing form, go check out my How to Read a Racing Form playlist, but let's continue. So after dissecting all the data that I put in that Google Sheets document, which will be provided, just generally looking at Volatile Progeny's first win, 38 of his 50 top earners have a win. 15 of those top 50 earners, which is 30%, won their debut race, so first ever time hitting the racetrack, they were good enough to win. Average total starts before they get their first win, 2.4 starts, and that's for all 50 runners. If the horse was 2 years old when they got their first win, it took about 1.8 starts, and they got their first win around mid-September. Again, 2-year-old races begin in the late spring or early summer, so they get a late start in their 2-year-old years to get their wins. So you would expect them to be in the summer at the earliest, or in the fall or winter to get their first 2-year-old win. It's not going to happen in the spring. They just don't race that early. If the horse was 3 years old, it took about 3.6 starts, and they got their first win around early March. So if they're not thriving or they're not very precocious and it takes them a little while to get going, it could take 3.6 starts about and get their first win around early March. That's just the average across the board. The average distance of their first win was 6.3 furlongs. Again, that's for all runners. If the horse was 2 years old, the average distance was 6.1 furlongs. Route races for 2-year-olds begin in the fall or winter. So if they get their first win in the summer or early fall, there's just a lot more sprint races offered as opposed to those route races. So you would expect sprint races to be the average distance for their first win. If 3-year-olds, the average distance was 6.5 furlongs. So, of course, as they get older, there are more longer races offered to them. So these are just the averages if they're 2 or 3. The total percent of the Volatile's first win being a sprint was 82%. Again, there's more sprint races early on for a 2-year-old, so that's going to skew it a little bit. But we can compare this number to the other sires that we've looked at already and just see where it falls, and might tell us about what Volatile horses like to do, especially when compared to other sires. But 82% for their first win in sprints, and 18% for their first win being a route. The first win surface, 87% on dirt, 8% on the turf, and in the US, races on turf make up between 10 to 20% of all races. So again, much like routes for 2-year-olds, there are relatively fewer turf races even offered for any horses, let alone 2 or 3-year-olds. Again, we can use this 8% to compare the win percentage to the other sires, just to gain a sense of which sires are more likely to produce better turf runners. And synthetic surfaces, 5% of Volatile runners got their first win on a synthetic surface. Volatile progeny latest win. So just taking a look at the progression from their first win as a 2-year-old into later in their racing careers. 14 of 50 of Volatile's top 50 earners have more than one win, which is 28%. Average distance of most recent win is 6.7 furlongs versus a 6.3 furlongs for the first win, so stretching out a little bit. Most recent win, was it a sprint? 64% of their most recent wins were sprints versus 82% for the maiden win. And again, the younger the horse, the more sprint races are offered and less route races. But you can see they're starting to stretch out to routes as they get a little bit older. Most recent win was it a route? 36%, up from 18% for their very first win. Volatile progeny seem better suited for sprints, but a good percentage are capable of stretching out. Most recent win surface, 86% on the dirt versus 87% for the maiden win. So about the same there. Definitely seem to be sticking to the dirt. Turf, however, 14% in their most recent win versus 8% in their maiden win. Again, a lot less turf races are offered, so any percentage change is significant. Synthetic surface, most recent win, 0% versus 5% in the maiden win. And a lot of this could have to do with what tracks that have a synthetic track are even open and offered later in the 2-year-old and early in their 3-year-old year. But the fact that they're not staying the same but switching away from synthetic just tells me that they're probably most apt to run on dirt, although turf does seem to be a productive place for Volatile runners to go. Volatile progeny seem to excel on the dirt surface, but a good number are winning on the turf, though turf races again only account for 10 to 20% of all races. Volatile's progeny seem to be fairly versatile between sprints and routes and dirt and turf surfaces. Taking a look at some of those dam-sires, again, that's in the far right column of the file I'm including. The dam-sires of the Volatile horses that won on debut, we have a list here. Keep some of these names in mind when you see other horses that are sired by a decent sire, but whose dam-sire is one of these horses. Maybe they're likely to win first time out. You might catch them at pretty decent odds because when there's not a lot of information to go off on horses that have never raced before, you can catch some decent prices for horses that might be precocious, meaning excelling at an early age. Which of the dam-sires had horses whose last win was sprinting, so maybe just throughout their career are more apt to be sprinters? Of course, each horse is an individual, but dam-sires where the last win was sprinting. Here's a list of those. I'm not going to go over them, but you can pause and read for yourself. And which dam-sires whose last win or most recent win was routing, so as they get older are stretching out further distances and getting some wins. Of course, you can go back and look at my videos of some of the other horses I've covered in this playlist and see if there's any overlap between winning on debut dam-sires for other sires that I've covered that have won on debut. If you see an overlap, that could be a good indicator that there's something there. Same with last win sprinting and last win routing. Go back and check out my video on Vacoma or McKinsey and see if there's any overlap with these dam-sires. And now before we wrap up, I just want to show everyone my comparison between the horses I have covered and just sort of an overall view of where each of these sires stands. So again, if we go down here to the bottom sum tab, we can compare the 3 horses that I've covered thus far. Up top in this row, we have the cumulative averages, and these numbers will change as I enter more information down below. But here we have Volatile. The average starts for their first career win takes about 2.4 starts for a Volatile sired horse to get their first start. You can compare that with McKinsey runners, that takes 2.8, and the Vacoma that takes 2.3. So Volatile a close second to Vacoma in terms of overall first wins. Average starts, first win as a 2-year-old, 1.8 starts, 1.7 for Vacoma, and McKinsey's take an extra start to get their first win as a 2-year-old. Move over to the average month that they're getting their first win, so how early in their 2-year-old year. As you can see, Vacomas are getting their first win in August. Volatiles take about a month longer. Average starts to get their first win as a 3-year-old, all pretty close when you compare the 3 sires I've covered so far. When you compare the month, of course, Vacoma, once again, a little more precocious, a little more productive sire. They're getting their first win as a 3-year-old in February, where Volatile is about early March. First win on the dirt, Volatile is in first. 87% of his progeny are getting their first win on the dirt, with only 80% for Vacoma. First win on the turf, 8%, the lowest of the 3 sires I've covered so far. First win on synthetic, the lowest of the 3 I've covered so far. So again, this just tells me that Volatile, look for them to run on the dirt. Doesn't mean they can't win on other surfaces, but dirt definitely seems to be where they do their best running. Last win on dirt, again, about the same as the first win, 86%, where it's gone up for McKinsey and down for Vacoma if you compare their first win to their most recent. Some of the Vacomas are switching over to the turf. Same with Volatile, 14% got their most recent win on the turf, whereas it was only 8% for their first win. Of course, it went down to 0% for synthetic, so that's where some of this number is coming from, this increase on the turf. First win sprinting. If you just compare the numbers, right on par with Vacoma, a little higher success rate sprinting than the McKinsey runners. Last win sprinting, so you can see this number decrease, so that tells me some of Volatile's runners are switching over to route races. Same with Vacoma's, same with McKinsey's. First win routing, 18% for Volatile, a little more than Vacoma, but not nearly as much as McKinsey. So McKinsey, maybe a little bit more of a route sort of sire. Last win routing, 36% for Volatile, where it was only 18% on the first win, so doubled up there. So they're not really having an issue stretching out. The percentage of debut winners who won their very first race that was sired by Volatile, 30%. Only 20% of McKinsey runners won on debut, but a whopping 42% of Vacoma first-time starters won. Total number of winners from those 50 top earners, 100%. So the top 50 earners by Vacoma, each one of them has won a race. Only 76% for Volatiles and 66% for McKinsey. And multiple winners. So how many of those top 50 earners have at least 2 wins? 28%, or 14 out of the 50 have 2 wins. 10 of the 50 for McKinsey and 22 of the 50 for Vacoma have more than 1 win. So to sort of sum everything up and give some final thoughts, 30% of Volatile's top 50 earners won on debut, which ranks 2 out of 3 in those sires that I've covered so far. It takes an average of 2.4 starts for Volatile's top 50 to record their first win, which again ranks 2 of 3. Volatile sired horses seem to thrive on the dirt. Again, that was 87% for their first win and 86% for their most recent, so they're sticking to dirt. Some turf ability, again, 8% for that first win and up to 14% for that most recent, so a good chunk of horses are switching to the turf. And remember, turf races make up only 10 to 20% of all races offered in America, so a lot less opportunity for horses to win on the turf. Volatile sired horses have some distance versatility between sprints and routes up to 8.5 furlongs, so 1 mile and a 16th. In the top 50 earners, I haven't seen anyone get a 9 furlong or longer race at this point. Of course, that could change, and these are really young stallions, so as more runners come out, we'll get a better sample size, but so far, no wins at 9 furlongs or greater. Volatile, by my comparison, seems to be a slightly more productive sire than McKinsey and substantially less productive than Vacoma at this stage, but Vacoma was the champion freshman sire of 2024, so that is to be expected. I mean, someone has to be the champion freshman sire. Volatile, I believe, was second, but lost to Vacoma, and when comparing the numbers, it makes sense to me. So Volatile, a very productive horse, but just a step below Vacoma, a bit more of a sprinter than McKinsey, but all very solid sires at this point, and that's just my comparison of the 3 so far. That's it for my video on Volatile. I hope that there was some useful information when you're handicapping some races. Thanks for watching. Feedback is appreciated, whether positive, negative. You have suggestions or some recommendations. I'd appreciate it if anyone would like, subscribe, and or share this video with friends. My target audience is for folks that are relatively new to the sport, so if you know anyone who's interested in horse racing, doesn't know much about it, or just sort of wants a refresher, I do have a couple of playlists. One is how to read a racing form. That's where I break down the racing form into small bite-sized pieces and very simply explain everything, what everything's telling you, and how you can dissect the information. In the past, I've taken friends to the racetrack before, and reading the racing form seems like a daunting task, and they don't want to do it. They just ask me who I like and why. But the racing form is there to help the player make an informed decision, so I think it's worthwhile for everyone to learn how to read the racing form for themselves. It really helps with the camaraderie, and it's good to bounce ideas off of each other and how two people can see the same race much differently. But there's that playlist. There's also betting on horse racing. That's where I break down all the bets that a track typically offers, talk about what it is, how much it costs based on your ticket structure, how I like to structure certain tickets based on who I like in a given racing day. So I just think that those are two good playlists for, again, anyone that's new to the sport or just sort of wants a refresher or just some additional food for thought. Coming up next, I might do another Pedigree playlist. I think this is really important information. It's kind of a lot and it's a lot to soak in, but once you start breaking it down and just start looking at it, everything just kind of makes sense, and you see patterns and you see trends for certain horses, and it can really pay off when you're looking at the racing form. When there's not a lot of information for horses that have not raced very much or are trying something new, you can gain a little bit of a sense, just a little edge on whether or not they're going to take to the new circumstance that today's race is offering. So I know it's useful information, and I also know that it's a lot to dissect, so I just hope that people are getting something out of it. I know I am, and I hope that people just are enjoying these videos and finding them somewhat useful. So I'll either do another Pedigree playlist, or I'm going to start mapping out the Haskell Stakes that's coming up. That's going to be a big race, and it seems like people really like additional information when it comes to those big races. So just a couple of ideas that are in my head. If anyone has any suggestions or questions or recommendations for anything else I should cover, I'm all ears. Just leave it in a comment below. Also, if you watch to the end of this video, there's some contact information if you want to contact me directly. But that's it. I just want to thank anybody for watching. I appreciate any feedback I receive. Thanks in advance, and thanks for watching this video, and I'll see you next time.